The smell of lavender lingered in the air, a faint, ghostly reminder of my father. Lavender had always been his favorite. He claimed it calmed his nerves, a belief I found myself desperately clinging to now. The scent wrapped around me like a fragile shield, but it did little to ward off the loneliness that settled in my chest. Standing in the living room of his high-rise condominium, the city lights outside felt distant, cold. They twinkled mockingly through the floor-to-ceiling windows, indifferent to the empty ache that consumed me. My fingers traced the worn leather of his favorite chair, the softness of it carrying the weight of years, of late-night conversations, laughter, and now, silence. The condo felt like a mausoleum, filled with memories that seemed to belong to another life. Only the faint hum of the air conditioning and the relentless ticking of the antique clock on the wall dared to disturb the suffocating stillness. "Have you thought about it, Catherine?" Gus's voice sliced through the quiet, sharp and impatient. I turned slowly to face him. He stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, his brow furrowed in that familiar way, as if I were some unsolvable puzzle. Gus had always been the practical one. The one who believed in efficiency and logic, who didn't let emotions get in the way. But today, his practicality felt like ice against my skin. "What?" My voice sounded far away, as if it didn't belong to me. "The condo," he repeated, more forceful this time. "Have you thought about selling it?" The question hung in the air like a bad smell. Of course, I'd thought about it. How could I not, with Gus and his parents reminding me at every opportunity since Dad died? But every time I imagined signing those papers, releasing this place to strangers, my stomach clenched with anxiety. "I'm not ready yet," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "This place. It means a lot to me." Gus sighed, rubbing a hand over his perfectly combed hair. "I understand, Catherine. But you have to be realistic. The condo is worth a lot of money, and it's just sitting here, empty. We could use that money, for Otis's college, for our future." Our future. The words hung in the air, hollow and fragile. I'd noticed the distance between us, the way Gus had become more and more of a stranger. At first, I'd blamed the stress of caring for Dad, the long hours Gus worked. Now, I wondered if I had simply been blind to the truth. "I know," I whispered, my gaze drifting back to the window. "But it's not just about the money. This is my father's home. It's all I have left of him." Gus stepped closer, his voice softening. "Catherine, I get that. Really, I do. But holding on to this place isn't going to bring him back. It's just keeping you stuck in the past. We need to move forward. Both of us." His words hit harder than they should have. He wasn't wrong, but that didn't make it easier. "I just need more time." "How much more time?" His voice grew hard again. "It's been months, Catherine. You can't keep putting this off forever." I blinked back tears, the knot in my throat tightening. "I'm doing the best I can, Gus." He exhaled sharply, frustration evident. "The market is hot right now. If we wait too long, we might miss out on the best offers." Before I could respond, the sound of the front door opening interrupted us. I turned, and there they were, Gus's parents, walking in like they owned the place. Helen beamed at me with forced cheer, while Frank hovered behind her, his smile equally rehearsed. "Catherine, dear," Helen exclaimed, wrapping me in a hug that felt more like a cage. "How are you holding up, sweetie? Such a tough time for you, I know." I stiffened, managing a thin smile as I stepped back. "I'm managing, Helen. Thanks." Helen's sympathetic gaze felt like a spotlight, and I resisted the urge to shrink under it. "We've been so worried about you. Gus has kept us updated, and we thought it might be a good idea to come over and help you get things sorted." I glanced at Gus, who avoided my eyes, his attention fixed on the floor. "What do you mean by sorted?" Helen exchanged a glance with Frank before replying, "Well, dear, we were just talking about the condo. How it might be a good idea to sell it. You know, get a fresh start." My stomach tightened. "I haven't made any decisions yet." Of course, Frank chimed in, stepping forward with that same insincere smile. "But if you need help finding a buyer, we know some people. They could offer you a fair price, maybe even above market value." I swallowed hard. "I appreciate it, but like I said, I'm not ready." Helen's hand found my arm, her grip surprisingly firm. "We just want what's best for you, Catherine. You've been through so much." The word help tasted bitter. Their version of help felt more like pushing me off a ledge. "Thank you. But I need more time." Helen and Frank exchanged another glance, silent communication that spoke volumes. They knew they'd pushed too hard. For now, they retreated to the kitchen, leaving me and Gus alone. He finally met my eyes, a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, crossing his face. But it vanished quickly, replaced by that same cold calculation. "Catherine," he said, almost pleading. "This is the right thing to do. You'll see that eventually." I stared at him, my heart breaking a little more. "Maybe. But right now, it doesn't feel like it." Before he could respond, Helen reappeared, a tray of tea and cookies in her hands, her voice too bright. "Let's sit down and chat, shall we?" We made small talk, but I was miles away. Gus's words echoed in my head, mingling with the memories of my father. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, one path leading into an uncertain future, the other keeping me tethered to the past. An hour later, they made their move. Helen's hand rested on my arm again, a sympathetic squeeze. "Catherine, before we go," she said, her voice sweet, "there's something we need to discuss." Frank nodded, pulling a manila envelope from his coat pocket. The knot in my stomach tightened. "Gus wants a divorce." The words hit me like a punch, leaving me breathless. "What?" I whispered. Gus stared at the floor, hands fidgeting. "We've been discussing it for a while," Helen continued. "Gus has been unhappy. This way, you can both move on." I looked at the envelope, then at Gus, who finally met my eyes, empty, resigned. "You've already decided," I said, voice trembling. They left, leaving me alone with the cold reality that everything had shattered. The days blurred together, each one weighed down by disbelief and betrayal. I had always thought of myself as strong, someone who could withstand life's storms. But this felt like a knife slowly twisting in my back, the pain sharp and unrelenting. The divorce papers lay untouched on the kitchen counter, mocking me with their presence. Each time I passed them, a wave of nausea surged through me. Signing them would finalize more than just my marriage, it would mark the end of everything I thought I knew, everything I believed I could trust. Otis was coming over tonight. My son, my rock, had been my only source of comfort since Gus's betrayal. When I called him after his father and grandparents left, his voice had been a lifeline, steady and sure. "Mom, don't do anything yet," he had said. "Just wait until I get there." Now, I waited, nerves frayed, the silence of the condo pressing in on me. I hadn't told him everything over the phone, just that his father wanted a divorce. There was more to reveal, but I needed to see him in person first. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. I hurried to the door, my heart pounding. Otis stood there, his tall frame filling the doorway, concern etched into his features. Without a word, he stepped inside and pulled me into a tight hug. "Mom," he murmured, his voice muffled against my hair. "I'm so sorry." I clung to him, finally letting the tears I had been holding back fall. He held me tighter, his hand gently rubbing my back, grounding me. "Let's sit down," he said after a few moments, guiding me to the living room. We sat on the couch, and he looked at me with those sharp, clear eyes, the same eyes that had always seen through any lie. "Tell me everything," he urged. "What exactly happened?" I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. "Your father. He's been distant for a while, but I didn't think it would come to this. When his parents came over, they gave me divorce papers. They said Gus wanted to split the money from the condo." Otis's jaw tightened, his hands falling into fists. "That doesn't surprise me. But there's more to this, Mom." "I know there is." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "I've been doing some digging. After you called me, I got a bad feeling. Something about the timing didn't sit right with me. So I started looking into Dad's financials, his activities. It wasn't hard, he's not exactly careful. He unlocked his phone and handed it to me. Look at these. I took the phone, my eyes scanning the images. Gus, smiling, carefree, dressed in expensive clothes I hadn't seen before. But it wasn't his appearance that caught my attention. It was the woman next to him. A younger woman, blonde, with a figure that screamed high maintenance. Who is she? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Her name is Vanessa, Otis replied, his tone grim. She's been seeing Dad for months, maybe longer. I'm pretty sure this whole divorce thing is part of his plan to start fresh with her. And it gets worse. My stomach twisted. Worse? How? Otis swiped to another set of images, this time, screenshots of messages between Gus and Vanessa. Each word felt like a knife to my heart. Vanessa, is everything set? When are you telling her? Gus, soon. I'll handle it. Just need to get the money sorted. Vanessa, can't wait to finally be rid of the old ball and chain. Gus, almost there, babe. New life, new house, just us. I stared at the screen, disbelief turning to fury. He was planning this. All along? Otis nodded, his face hard. It looks that way. And there's something else. I found out that Grandma Helen and Grandpa Frank recently paid off a huge loan. Their house was under renovation for months, and they just finished it. I think the money they're counting on from your divorce settlement is part of that plan. My mind struggled to process it all. Gus's parents, always so overbearing, so controlling, had been part of this, too? It was too much to bear. So they've all been in on this? I asked, my voice trembling. Otis's gaze softened, though anger still simmered in his eyes. I think so, Mom. But we're not going to let them win. I nodded, trying to summon some strength. What do we do now? Otis leaned forward, determination blazing in his eyes. We fight back. I've already talked to a lawyer friend. We can contest the divorce settlement, especially now that we have proof of Dad's affair. And the condo money, they can't touch it. It's your inheritance, Mom. They won't get away with this. The weight of everything pressed down on me, but Otis's words gave me a glimmer of hope. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. Thank you, Otis, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. I don't know what I'd do without you. He smiled, that warm, reassuring smile that always made me feel like everything would be okay. You don't have to do this alone, Mom. We're going to get through this, I promise. As we sat there, making plans and figuring out our next moves, a new resolve took hold of me. Gus and his parents had underestimated me. They thought I would crumble, that I would let them take everything. But they were wrong. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Not now, not ever. And as Otis and I plotted our next steps, a part of me felt an unexpected sense of relief. The illusion of my marriage had been shattered, but maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it was time to rebuild, on my own terms. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, intimate, almost suffocating under the weight of what was at stake. The air was thick with tension, every breath feeling like a struggle. I sat beside my lawyer, Margaret, my hands clenched in my lap to keep them from trembling. Across the aisle, Gus sat stone-faced, but the slight twitch in his jaw betrayed him. He wasn't as calm as he wanted to appear. Behind me, Otis sat like a steady anchor in a storm. His presence was the one constant I could rely on. Without him, I wasn't sure I'd have made it this far. The door to the judge's chambers creaked open, and Judge Harrison, a stern man in his 50s, entered. His expression was unreadable as he settled into his seat, flipping through the documents before him. Let's proceed, he said, his voice slicing through the silence. We're here to finalize the divorce between Catherine and Gus Holloway. Both parties are present, along with their legal representation. Mrs. Holloway, we'll start with you. Margaret rose gracefully. Her calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. Thank you, Your Honor. As you're aware, we are here not only to finalize the divorce but also to address financial compensation. My client, Mrs. Holloway, is seeking damages on the grounds of infidelity and protection of her inherited assets. She handed a thick stack of documents to the bailiff, who presented them to the judge. These documents include Mr. Holloway's financial transactions, evidence of his affair with Vanessa Carlyle, and proof that he and his parents intended to use the sale of Mrs. Holloway's inherited condominium to fund personal ventures. Judge Harrison's eyes scanned the pages, his face giving nothing away. "Mr. Holloway, do you have anything to say in response to these allegations?" Gus's lawyer, Amanda, stood, her polished exterior unwavering. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges the affair but contends that the condominium, as a marital asset, should be divided accordingly." Margaret didn't miss a beat. "Your Honor, the condominium was inherited after Mr. Holloway's marriage to my client. Legally, it cannot be considered a marital asset." The judge turned his gaze to Gus, sharp as a knife. "Mr. Holloway, your actions, both the infidelity and your handling of the inheritance, carry significant legal consequences. Do you understand that?" Gus shifted in his seat, his composure cracking. I thought we built everything together. I thought I was entitled." The judge's voice hardened. "Marriage is a partnership, Mr. Holloway, not a license to deceive. The condominium is not yours to claim." A spark of triumph flickered in me, but I kept my face neutral. There was still more to come. Margaret pressed on, her voice unyielding. "In addition, we seek compensatory damages for the emotional distress caused by Mr. Holloway's infidelity and punitive damages for his attempt to defraud my client." Amanda moved to object, but the judge silenced her with a raised hand. "The evidence is clear. Mr. Holloway, you will pay compensatory damages and cover Mrs. Holloway's legal fees. As for punitive damages, I'll deliberate further." Gus paled. The reality of his loss hit him like a blow, and the indifference he had worn like armor crumbled. He leaned toward Amanda, desperation in his eyes, but she could only shake her head. With a decisive bang of the gavel, Judge Harrison sealed Gus's fate. "The court rules in favor of Mrs. Holloway. The divorce is granted, and the financial rulings are enforceable immediately. Court is adjourned." The echo of the gavel reverberated through me, a final note to a symphony of betrayal. Relief washed over me, almost overwhelming in its intensity. It was over. Finally, over. Otis leaned forward, his voice full of pride. "You did it, Mom. It's really over." Tears welled in my eyes as I turned to him. "I couldn't have done it without you, Otis. You've been my strength." He hugged me tightly. "You've always had the strength, Mom. You just needed to see it." As we stepped out into the late afternoon sun, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. The courthouse steps, bathed in warm light, seemed to symbolize a new beginning. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Gus and his parents huddled together by the parking lot, their faces etched with disbelief and anger. For a moment, I felt a twinge of pity, but it quickly faded. They had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, they were the ones left empty-handed. Margaret joined us, her professional poise giving way to a warm smile. "Congratulations, Catherine. You fought hard, and it paid off." "Thank you, Margaret," I said, meaning every word. "You were incredible. I couldn't have asked for a better lawyer, or a better friend." She nodded, her eyes twinkling. "You deserve every bit of peace that's coming your way." As we walked toward the car, Otis nudged me playfully. "So, what now? Any big plans for the newly liberated Catherine Holloway?" I laughed, the sound feeling both foreign and wonderfully familiar. "Maybe I'll find a place by the water. Somewhere peaceful. Somewhere that's mine." Otis grinned. "Sounds perfect. You've earned it, Mom." As we drove away, the city skyline fading in the rearview mirror, I felt hope bloom inside me. The future was a vast, open expanse of possibility. And for the first time in years, I was ready to embrace it, on my terms. Gus and his family had tried to break me, but they had only made me stronger. With Otis by my side and a world of new beginnings ahead, I knew one thing for sure: I was going to be just fine. And that was the sweetest victory of all. If you like this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.